everybody. Let's get this thing started as usual. Just quick intro, give folks some time to join in, as well as documenting for those watching the video later who don't know what brown bag is. So let's go over all that stuff. Did I start recording? Yes, I did. All right, so this is the virtual brown bag. We are recording these things, so since we encourage people to share their tips and tricks and challenges and what have you, and possibly sharing their screens as well, make sure that you're not sharing anything that could cause you any sort of trouble. The virtual brown bag is a meeting that we hold every week, every Thursday, and we share tips and tricks, tools, shortcuts, anything that can make you more productive. Share those with others. Experiences, maybe something you've learned the hard way, share those with others as well. Maybe you have some frustrations or difficulties for something that you're trying to implement, maybe some code that you're trying to write and you cannot get it right, share those with us here. It's not supposed to be a one-way conversation, right? It's not your typical, one guy talking through the whole meeting, going through a formal type of presentation. It's more like, hey guys, check this out. I just learned about this thing here, or, things along those lines. So we do this every Thursday, 12 to 1 Central Time, here on Skype, at least for now. Everybody and anybody who's willing to either share or learn are more than welcome to join us. So let your friends know. We've been really all over the map over the years. When we've been doing the brown bag, we've covered a number of different languages, frameworks, libraries, tips, anything. It's all up to whoever wants to share whatever the heck they want to share. Right, so here's a
slide.
What was that?
We need to update the slide.
Absolutely. Yeah, this comes from like the first run of the brown bag. I haven't added stuff that we've had in our second run. And as we keep going through this, I think I would just keep adding to it instead of like removing the thing. Well, maybe
the circle gets larger.
Really? Either that or the font gets smaller. Right, so I even wonder, well, maybe removing the things that really do not apply anymore, like, Mercurial, maybe, sadly. Right, but for other things, I mean, we talk about, say, solid principles, for instance. I still think it's as applicable today as it was like 10 years ago, right? Because there's still a lot of people who don't understand the principles, they don't apply the principles, or they think, well, if I'm doing JavaScript or TypeScript or whatever, those no longer apply. Well, you might be surprised, right? So, yeah, definitely need to update that. Oops, I clicked on the wrong thing here. What else did we have there? Of course, the website. So check out virtualbrownbag.com to always find the link to the meetup in the current week, as well as links to the videos for the previous meetings. They are all up on the site shortly after we're done with the meeting. Let people know about it. And without further ado, let's get rolling. As usual, I do have stuff to share. I always have something to talk about, but I'd like to ask you, George, you have anything up there, or the other guys who join in? I see Alper is there. Hey, Alper, thanks for joining us. And Augusto, thanks for coming back.
Well, yeah, let's see. If no one else has stuff that they want to talk about, I certainly have a couple things that I would bring up.
All right. Well, before you start, let's not that I want to like throw anybody under the bus, but hey, Alper, I saw that you finished that the Dahan's course. Would you care to maybe share with us how that went?
Yeah. That was quite the. So when I first looked at the course, I was just trying to schedule like, how am I gonna do this? This is like 5-day course, and I was in the middle of studying other things like AWS certification, all that. I looked at it, and there's not an easy way, but like if you add them up, it's like around 32 hours of video. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And it's really dense. Like it's filled with information. So, like if you're if you're taking notes like I did, like it's gonna take way longer. So like I stop and just like type some things around and stuff like the because it was really interesting to tell it in the sense that it was just turning a lot of the things that you've taken for granted upside down, right?
Hmm.
I mean, like the usual, he calls it entity-centric modeling and layered architecture and all that. And it's like, all of them are wrong. So like, you have like you have like when the object-oriented design, you just basically like throws like right under the bus at the beginning. It just says like the way you design a system, you just start with the nouns, right? There's a customer entity, there's a whatever order entity, all those things, and then you you make them entities, and then you store them in the database, and you slap a repository and service on top of that, and then later on you figure out that how wrong you were with that design and stuff, and then it just goes to explain. So it was really interesting. I think I learned a lot, and the good thing about that one is just like a lot of the stuff like you were mentioning about the clean code,
Right.
just really good information that has a really long shelf life. Like, it's not going to be, I was just looking at that slide, like, it's not going to be obsolete like, Silverlight or Iron Ruby or something like that. So, like, it's more principle based information about, you know, modeling your business capabilities. So, I mean, I found it very useful and just really opened my eyes in terms of, you know, looking at things from like a business capabilities, business process perspective, and trying to avoid remote calls as much as possible. So it was
Okay.
really interesting. I mean, I recommend it to anyone.
Very good. Yeah, I've had it up like in my browser, and I think I've gone through the first hour maybe. And I'm like, okay, I do need to make a practice to just set like, okay, at least an hour a day, go through it. Because I did get scared with the, people saying, oh yeah, it's like, 30 hours plus of training. I'm like, man, I don't have that kind of time right now.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
at the same token, everybody who I know who have taken this course, they always swear by it. So it's like, I know I need it, so I just need to make the time, not find the time, but just make the time for it.
yeah. Absolutely. That's what I did. I mean, I just asked the people who have taken that course before because I mean, I was planning on taking it in person anyways, but like
Mhm.
it was just not the right time. So I asked them like, do I need to stop everything and then just like focus on this? And it's like, absolutely, you have to watch this class. So that's what I did.
Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing, man. That just makes me wanna, you know, check it out even more.
Me too. Last night I was like, all right, I'm gonna do stuff, and then put the kids down to bed. Just like sat on the couch, just zoning out. I didn't even turn on the TV. Just looked in the distance, like 15 minutes. I was like, I gotta go to bed.
Right, right. Yeah, I noticed that the older I get, the more I focus on learning things that will last for a longer period of time. I've been telling people like back 10 years ago, with the kind of access that I had to say the newer versions of C Sharp and stuff like that, I used to be like, all over it. It's like, okay, let me learn everything that there is to know about what's coming out in C Sharp. And the older I get, the more I'm like, nah, that doesn't matter, right? On
We
the
get better at it
counter,
too. We get better at knowing what doesn't matter.
exactly. That's
Yeah.
exactly right, right? You just like I look back at the things that I've learned as far as like, architecture and, design patterns and solid and clean code and not just about the techniques, but the why we need to know those things. Those are like, yes, I'm so glad that I've learned those things because that it does not matter what front end technology I'm using, what back end, what language, those really don't matter, right? I need to look through that. So, yeah, that's good stuff. Thanks for sharing, Upper.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Sure
Speaking
thing.
of C Sharp, did you see the new announcement for for that their source generators are coming to C Sharp?
I did not see that. Tell me more about it.
So I mean, if you remember, like probably like 11 years ago, I was predicting like the next version of C# is going to focus on aspect-oriented programming and being
Yeah.
able to generate code from like during the compilation process, which
Yeah.
I was very wrong on. They never did. But now it's coming. In the next version, so there's a feature called source generators. I haven't actually looked into it beyond reading an article, but again, like doing it long enough that I kind of get it.
Okay.
So there's a yeah, you can just Google it and pull it up right now and see an
Sure.
example. But it's called source generators, and basically it's a way to hook into some code into the compilation process and to generate more code on the fly. And it has some very specific limitations, like for example, you can only add code, not modify code, which is going to annoy people, but I understand why they did that. Sure. So you can like
Okay.
add a new way of defining a property or something, a new property or something like that. Add an interface implementation. You could also you can't see the output of all other source generators. So the code you output is going to be completely isolated, and a couple other limitations like that. But otherwise, it seems pretty darn cool. Yeah, it's probably examples further down.
Right.
All right, where's it? Yeah, where's an example of where they? Yeah, like that source builder dot append. Looks like they're yeah. See, like they're dealing directly with a syntax tree, and they're
Okay.
appending code to there. I think you don't. I think this is like the source builder thing that you output as a string. You can do it otherwise, but all the examples I saw just were
So
doing it as a string, and it runs during the compilation process itself and emits code.
okay. So catch me up, because I remember when I stepped away from C# for a number of years. That was around the time when Roslyn came out, and I thought that Roslyn was coming in partly to give us that kind of functionality. Where did I? Are you familiar with Roslyn? Do you know much about
Yeah,
it?
I don't know. A lot of the stuff I actually I've been away from C# too for a couple of years.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So I don't know the details, but yeah, like Roslyn was, as far as I know, the compiler, like a new version of the compiler that was complete rewrite to make it easier to be extensible, but it still wasn't something that
Okay.
was like really
It's
available to users.
interesting.
Yeah, people are still using MS Build.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I was gonna say, okay, you know, INPC, I notify property changed is something that always comes into discussion for this. It was like one reason why back then we used what was the framework and tool for aspect-oriented programming we used? Do you remember?
I remember,
Post sharp.
yeah, what was
Post
it?
Sharp. Post
Post,
Sharp.
yeah,
That
there's
was it.
Post Sharp, and there was one other one. Yeah, there
There
were.
Yeah, I remember we were using that, and then when C
But
Sharp 4 came out with the dynamics, I remember I ended up creating like a decorator for view models where I would just feed this decorator with my view model and then extend, do the notify property change there so that the view models didn't have to implement all that junk. So it seems like another solution for that kind of problem.
yeah, right, exactly. And I remember like there was like with the and I understand why they never went to the kind of meta program approach because even like once dynamic entered the picture and with stuff like dynamic proxy around, you could do a lot of this stuff. In fact,
Right.
I remember even with Roslyn, you could do ILGen and like actually emit stuff at runtime. This is a little different. This emits it at compile time. So I think it is a lot of what Post Sharp does, but setting like standards and very specific guidelines on how it should work. Right?
Yeah, yeah, you're right. That's compile time. Yeah, something I've done a lot over the last decade probably was to generate code during runtime, right? And I mean, the project that we worked together, George, what, 10 years ago, we were doing some of that, right? Where the database had expressions and things like that. We would read that on the fly, spit out the C# code as a text file or text stream that we would compile during runtime and then just run those as lambdas that we compile or delegates that we compile during runtime. But yeah, you're right. This is compile time, which would not apply to that kind of scenario then.
And you know, it's coming directly from Microsoft, so you know it's going to come with the tooling for it.
That's right.
The other
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Okay.
So what? How do you troubleshoot code like that though? Like I mean, you say you added code and then your source generated code is throwing an exception. That's like kind of not a good place to be, I think.
Yeah, with difficulty is the answer. Well, I think the fact that it's kind of isolated and like is probably makes it a little easier, right? Because it's not like two different source generators can't interfere with each other, really. That's like part of it. So that makes it a little easier because you at least know the one place to look. But yeah, I it's gonna be difficult. But again, this isn't problems that people don't have in other languages. Like, you know, Lisp is all about metaprogramming, and I mean, go a little Rails. Rails is all stuff that's generated dynamically and runs in the background. And I mean,
right.
I mean, you've done a lot more Rails than I do, right, Claudio? But like,
Yeah.
it can
Yeah.
be tough, but it's not impossible to troubleshoot.
Exactly. Well, yeah, that's the thing. That's I mean, I'm still a big fan of Rails, and that's what I use for some of my like personal projects because I don't need to know exactly how the framework is built. I know that, you know, if I follow the conventions that it has put, the opinions that it has, things will work. And then on that 20% of the time when it's like, well, I do need to dig a little bit deeper, it's not too hard to, you know, find things out. So I do like that kind of model. I just don't have the time or the nerdiness, I guess, in me to go figure out, you know, bits and bytes of everything. I don't have that kind of time. I don't have that kind of patience. So thinking along those lines, yeah, I definitely need to look a little more into this to see what, you know, when we could be used. Because again, I've done quite a bit of, you know, dynamic generation, but during runtime, because really it's like, it's not until runtime when I actually know the code that I need generated. So I need to think, you know, what are the scenarios for like during compile time that we would use this thing for?
Implementing iNotify property change and stuff like that.
Well, that is the case if you can create those during compile time. But remember, on that one project, we wouldn't be able to do that because we wouldn't know the properties until during runtime.
Yeah, no, I know. So this is it's helpers, right? It's all stuff that you could do otherwise, but would
Right.
either generate a bunch of templating like code that you just don't want to look at,
Sure. Yeah.
or it will generate, you know, it'll just be a hassle to do.
Right.
Pretty much it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
This could replace the IL weavers yeah, we could absolutely replace the IL weavers.
Right.
There's API plans, yeah.
API plans, yeah.
Yeah. Introspect your graph. Well, I mean, yeah. I still feel like I've been seeing less IL weaving, IL generation stuff lately, but it certainly happens still.
Yeah. Okay.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up.
So one other thing that I just wanted to bring up, and I think it's I'll even pose this as an open question to the group, because it's in general just a good thing to think about. So Dino launched recently. Dino is a sort of Node, but not really Node alternative by the guy that initially started Node. So he went 1.0 today. And and one of its big things is hyping its security model. and features and how everything, like any sort of resource, you have to explicitly grant it permission. And it kind of got me thinking, because I don't know that we as a development community have really articulated it. What sort of permissions model would we like to see? Um, and I have some thoughts on that, which I could blab about, but if anybody wants to jump in, please do. Um, because I think it's an important question to pose ourselves. So, for example, you install your bank app on an Android phone, probably iOS too. I just don't have an iPhone. And you'll see a lot of times you'll install it, pops up, it requires these permissions, it requires access to your camera, it requires access to GPS, blah blah. And at that point, you have the option of like, well, okay, I either install it or don't. And if I install it, I granted those permissions, or I can uninstall it. Um, it ideally, I would like, whether it's enforced by tech, which I don't exactly see how it could work, or enforced just culturally, that all of those options, like the software should do its best to work if permissions are not granted, and that you can not grant them granularly. So again, that example, I would be presented with a menu that says, would that says, would you like to give this application access to your camera? If you do not, you will not be able to do any mobile check deposits. Would you like to give it access to GPS? If you do not, we cannot do advanced anti-fraud detection. And you can disable those options, and it will just work without those features. So that's kind of level one of just basic permissions that I think you kind of have to I would love to see culturally happen. Um, and now there's a problem, kind of how do you do it? And that kind of gets into my other issue, because the other big issue we have with dependencies, especially in Node, but in other languages to some degree too, is massive dependency chains. And again, this is all kind of very rough. I was just thinking through it today. So one of the things so we have these dependency chains where you have a dependency A, and that depends on dependency B, which depends on dependency C, and dependency C upgraded a version. And actually, what had really happened was the guy who was maintaining was tired of maintaining it, and he gave up rights to someone volunteered, and then someone that volunteered ended up being, having ties to the mob or something, is now injecting crypto coin miners into everyone's browsers, which is stuff that absolutely happens all the time, and it's shocking that it's not a lot worse of a problem than it actually is. So you have all these situations come up. So like, how could we deal with that? And that case, and for that level, my kind of thought process is that you could have different kind of security layers, where maybe the application develop the first order application kind of accepts these, and it's made clear to the user even, that says, all right, either the tightest most level that has like the highest level security is like, this application will not run any code that has not been reviewed by the core team of the runtime, right? So you have certificates for that. You can't even upgrade a version without having without having that. You have to come up with some standards around what does it mean to get a review and get a certificate. Once you have those standards, you could have kind of level 2, where you're like, okay, I'm okay with going beyond that, but like, any code that I run has to have been reviewed by an independent authority, other than the an independent authority within some sort of group, right? So it's not just the core team, but maybe beyond. Level 3, maybe like it has to be been reviewed by someone other than the author or someone who's not particularly related to the authors. And I think an interesting thing with that is if you can kind of come up with a model like that, then that sort of enables the way to culturally transform stuff for the first part that I was talking about with permissions, because what you could do then is say, like, you're reviewing their code, you're reviewing their project, you reject it if it's not following these standards. It gives you it gives you a way to define and enforce a culture, which after a while becomes something that's just generally expected, and you don't have to work as hard to enforce it.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I have two things that
Yeah.
you got me thinking there. One, there is the technical aspect with the reviewing the code and making sure it conforms with the standards and all that. But I'm also thinking from the user's standpoint. Like you brought up a very good example, right? So somebody picks up their phone and they install the app from their banking system and what have you, and then the app asks, well, do you want to grant access to the camera? Well, maybe. Why should I? Right? What does that give me? And what if I don't allow you? What, I mean, why are you asking me that question?
Right. It has to explain. Right.
Right? And I mean, to what level do you explain that? Because if you take I'm not even gonna use my mom as an example because she would never install like a banking app or anything like that. She's beyond that age already. But I'm thinking of users who are like, oh yeah. They're just because those kind of questions end up being an annoyance to most users, right? So how do we give the user, okay, this is what you should know about this to make an informed decision, whether you want to say yes or no?
That's true. So one of the things that you could do is insist on a UX review too.
Right.
That's part of your review thing, and you have UX standards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. To not fall into that whole, oh, have you read the acceptance agreement or the terms of agreement or whatever? It's like, yeah, whatever. You think that nobody reads. Well,
yeah, and I don't think that the yeah, whatever is going to be, something that you can realistically get around. But
right.
But I think part of the UX thing is going to be like that you don't ever present them with too many choices at one time.
True.
Yeah.
True. But I like yes, we've all learned or should have learned that, we have to make the app secure by default, and all that. At the same token, I like from a user's perspective, it's like, well, if you don't grant this app access to your camera, you are not going to be able to make deposits like that. Like, oh, okay, all right. If that's not something I'm going to be doing anyways, I don't care. So no, do not access my camera, right? And like from a user's perspective that may not be aware of certain things, it's like, well, okay, if I do grant you access to my camera, what kind of problem could I generate if I do so? Like, what is the problem? Why are you asking me that question, right? Why can't you just go ahead and like access my camera? Because some users are not thinking, oh yeah, privacy issues and things like that. Like, what are the potential threats, right? How do we educate the user along those lines? Should we? I don't know.
Yeah, I think some of it, so you got to promote understanding. I think some of it could just be done with, again, when you throw it to the UX people, you get some like pretty interesting stuff. And like, all right, you can work with like shared standards. So there's some logo that you have to slap on it, right? A logo for privacy, for example, for potential privacy stuff, and over time, that just becomes understood. Right. So there's good kind of non-technical solutions you could do with that. But yeah. I agree. I don't know if anyone else has any ideas, but I think it is important to define kind of a vision on that.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to weigh in?
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused. Let me put on my agile hat to kind of we start talking about security then, like in the context of Dino and stuff. But then we kind of pivoted into talking about like app security, and also there's this stuff about dependency management. Like the way Node handles it, packages really tiny and stuff, and there's a ton of them. And then somebody pulls them off, and it's like it's been downloaded a million times, and it just breaks everything. Versus Dino, there's like a standard library. So, there's a lot of things to talk about. I guess it just matters like how we scope it down. I think, I mean, there's always that uh, tension between like the Rails way, right? What do they call it, omakase or something, like everything batteries included and stuff, versus the Unix way, which is like do one thing well, like, and let things pipe in and pipe out. So my personal opinion, like Node has gone too far. I mean, again, it's maybe just like like Claudio was saying, it's just the age that you're just like older now. Like you don't have time to waste on just like debugging like the low level code and stuff. You just want like some stable platform to build on, and then standard library hopefully will give you that you can just build upon. So because you really don't want to invest time in learning stuff that's like really so tied to the technology that may just go obsolete before you know it.
Well, the one thing I want to push back on that is that I don't think it's really the Node way, in that Node had anything to do with the proliferation of their small packages. I think that's just an aspect of the fact that it's a really, really large community, and that's how it happened to grow. I don't think Node did anything to encourage it that couldn't have happened in Ruby or Python or even .NET. It's just it has a heck of a lot more people using it and trying to do all that stuff, right? It's not like there was some reason that people couldn't have written an what was it, an is lowercase package in NuGet. Right? They could have, just didn't, because because there aren't so many people that one of them thought it was a great idea. I mean, part of it also had to do with inconsistencies, and the JavaScript doesn't have a standard library, but I would hope that that's not like the most major thing, right?
Yeah. Also, I think the part of the reason why no one is going to write an is lower NuGet package, because you have a standard library that does it, right? So that's the thing about the standard libraries. I think Dino is on the. I mean, I think Dino is right in that aspect, having some kind of a standard library built into the platform, and it's built on TypeScript, so you can just do some static analysis and stuff. So, yeah, as much. I mean, I'd like to get as much help as I can get, like doing software development. So, I'll take the Dino model over the Node model any day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We'll see where Dino goes. I've seen competitors to Node rise and fall. I'm not.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's way too early.
I'm not waiting with too much bated breath for it, but fine. Sort of. Yeah, the is even package on npm. That's right. Which allows you to tell if a number is even.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff like that. But again, there's not an is even method in the .NET standard library, or in any standard library. No standard library has an is even package. The reason that it exists in Node is because there's enough people there that one of them thought it was a good idea to do, and there's so many more people that enough of them thought it was a fine idea to include it. Like that's really mostly it. Now there are, and also, because remember, Node serves two different communities, right? It serves the Node community itself, which is huge, but then also, and the Node community is larger than any of the ones that we've talked about, but then also it serves the browser community, the community of packages that run in the browser, which is larger than which is multiple times, many times larger than any of the like other communities. So like stuff like is even I doubt is even is an instance of it, but there are ones where you look at it, and I've looked at the source code before, and I'm like, this is stupid. This shouldn't exist. And you look at it, and there's code in there that actually does handle this edge case. That if you go ahead and run it on IE9, there's this edge case that if you have a string that begins with a certain thing, it won't work, and it handles those edge cases. And you're like, okay, that's understandable. And again, that's not really a part of the node model. That's just that there's so many more people using it for so many more purposes. I don't see how Dino gets away from that if they're planning on supporting code that runs in the browser. Because you're not going to include is even in your standard library. You're just not. That'd be stupid. But some, I don't know. Look at the source code for it. We'll see if it's just a mod 2 or if there's like handling there for integer overflow errors. Click on the repository down below.
Yeah, where is it?
On the right-hand side.
Oh, right there. Man.
Open up index.js.
Right there.
Damn it.
Exactly what you
We
need.
gotta
More
go to
dependencies.
is odd.
That's what Augusto said. That it has a dependency on is odd. That is, oh man, that is
Yeah.
odd indeed.
Schlinkard really nailed this for his resume.
Oh man.
Yeah. But again, it's just that there's that many people and serving that many things. Look at his odd. See what his odd does.
Okay.
Yeah, back to NPM and search from there. I mean, unless it's by him, his odd is one
Oh
of his.
yeah. I don't know. Yeah, let's go back there. Oh man.
But I mean, you see what I'm saying. Like sometimes it is actually necessary if you're serving browsers or whatever. You're serving all these platforms because there's going to be some weird, integer overflow or something that you need to handle on some on some platform.
Ooh, okay.
You can't get away from that. And at some point, when you have enough people doing enough of that, then you just see. It's not apparently not quite as simple as you want, though. Really, that's silly. I would still.
And then there's another dependency is number, so the rabbit hole continues.
Yeah. Although number will definitely definitely would be more complex. And again, is number. It's dependent on implementation. Do you really want to count on? And if you're running this against 15 different runtimes, more JavaScript runs against more. If you're running against 50 different runtimes, which is probably about more realistic with JavaScript, do you really want to depend on every runtime getting its standard library implementation of its number correct? So I can absolutely see the point of splitting it up this way. And again, it's not Node's fault. It's the fact that this is a much larger community than anyone else.
That's true. I disagree that JavaScript is awful, and that's why these things exist.
I mean, I'll agree that JavaScript is awful, but again, that's not why these things exist. These things exist because it runs on so many more things than and is run by so many more people than anything else.
That is true, but
Yeah.
man, these things are annoying. It's like I don't have patience to deal with this kind of stuff anymore, you know. That's where I get the younger folks to just go at it, have fun at it, because it's like that's not fun for me. Once in a while I overhear conversations from like younger developers, and they're like, oh, I was having so much fun with X, Y, and Z, and I'm like, do you really call that fun? You people need to get a life.
I did. I read an article. I was linked to an article and I read it yesterday. It was really good. It's about the different tribes of programming by Josh something else. Let me find it.
Okay.
Yeah, Josh, tribes of programming, and he's got a really it's three tribes of programming by Josh Saff. Let me post it in the chat.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And this is kind of a really useful way to think about it. And you could probably pull it up. We could talk through it right now. But he's, roughly breaking up saying like kind of programmers tend to fall into 1 to 3 categories. Category one is like the first category is one that sees programming as art, as almost applied mathematics, but like as an art form almost, right? And you're focusing on the code. Um,
Right.
Tribe two is one that focuses on it's a way to get a machine to do stuff, so it's inseparable from right. So if you scroll down, he's like talking about it like
Yeah.
he
Poet.
like people that are like in that first group are like Brett Victor. He says Rich Hickey. He mentions Steve Iggy. I'm like, oh man, that's like the three guys that I cite the most often right away. Like you got all three of them. The one thing he talks about is that it's for that's for Haskell devs. I'm like, I'm not that into Haskell, but
Okay.
the rest of it, yeah, that's me. But then like the hardware hackers, which are like the people that like no, it's about like being close to the hardware and making the hardware go and understanding all the nitty gritty of stuff, which yeah is I get it. Like those guys are important, but that's I think a lot of where that attention was the people that do have fun focusing on that stuff. And then the third tribe is the people like no, software is for making things that are useful for other people. It has no inherent value of itself in itself.
Yeah.
And
I have morphed into that tribe. I think I've been through all of those over the years. Now, today's Claudio, definitely the third one, the maker, I guess.
I'm more on one, but I've spent my entire career, like most of my career in consulting, so I've got a lot of three as well. I
And
do not enjoy the low level stuff very much at all. But
yeah,
it's a really interesting article and it's a useful way of thinking about this stuff. Obviously, it's all metaphor and far from 100%, but
right.
like he's got some really interesting examples where he's like he's like talking about how this actually explains certain things, certain discussions going on in Rust and so on. Yeah.
Interesting. I like it. Yeah, I'll read through it later because it does look like stuff I've been thinking about a lot. I mean, I do think that we need people in all those three tribes, uh, but I don't see myself like sticking in like one or two anymore. It's just not me anymore.
Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you for bringing that up. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Helper says that is squarely in two. Software is a tool for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
think that was three, but
What's
so
that?
two is the one that is the people that are all about understanding how the machine works and that
Right.
it's all about the machine itself. One is about no, it's the abstract expression of mathematics. Three is it's a
Oh, okay.
tool to get stuff done. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So Alper said, yeah, he's into three. I've been as of recently, what I've been the way I've been talking to developers is, knowing where I came from, where writing code was just fun. It was awesome. The things that we could, have the computer do, that was great. That's why I got into software, I guess, to begin with. And it took me a while to actually start asking me the question, why do we build software exactly? And at the end of the day, is to, automate other people's lives. Unless, of course, if you're writing games and things like that, it's a different kind. But if I'm thinking like line of business type of application, which is where I've spent most of my time as a developer on, and we're really, the reason why we're writing or building that kind of software is to automate people's lives, to make sure that they are more efficient doing what they do, that they make less mistakes, because there are things that the computer can do better than a human being. That way, you free up the humans' capabilities of doing what humans are better at doing. And thinking from that angle, when I see developers who are not efficient building software, it makes me wonder. It's like, why are you working in building software, right? If you cannot make your own life more efficient, how are you going to make somebody else's life more efficient? I've been asking me that question a lot, right? Like, for example, if I see a software developer who, instead of hitting Control S to save changes, the person goes to the mouse to go find files, save, little things like catches me, right? If you need to like navigate to a folder in your drive and you're on Windows and you go to the mouse, you hit the little window button and then you go find the Explorer and then you go click, 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 as opposed to having a more efficient way to go to the folder that you need, given what you're trying to do. It makes me think, are you really the best person to automate somebody else's life if you don't do that to your own life? I've been asking myself that question many, many times over the last several years.
Although I will say that now that we have like a decent version control, which is what I'll call Git for now. Now that we have decent version control, friggin', why do we need a save? Just save.
Yeah.
Just save and our editors should keep a really good undo facility. I shouldn't have to save stuff.
I agree. That's one example that I bring up. Like, why do we still use floppy disks as the icon to save? Why do we have a save button to begin with? Like you're saying, it's like, if we are building software to somewhat model humans' activities, when we are doing things as a human, we don't say, oh, I'm going to save that information. We don't do that. We don't keep like work, 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 save, 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 work, work. It's not like that, right? I mean, if you're writing, like working on a draft of something, you're not all the time saving it. It's there. It just happens. And then it's more about the, okay, now I want to turn that from a draft into something that I'm going to push through. Like maybe I need to submit this invoice. That's a business activity. It has nothing to do with, oh yeah, I need to save the invoice. So why do we still use the save button on screens? So things along those lines. That's why I do favor applications that, yeah, you don't have to keep hitting save all the time. It just saves that for you. Right? That makes more sense because that's how we operate as humans.
Yeah. It's a leaked abstraction that I don't think is actually helpful anymore, even in coding.
Right.
Yeah. Although, in order to make it work well, you have to have a better undo system than every single editor except for Emacs.
Yes.
Because with Emacs, you actually do have this feature where like you can undo, redo, and then visualize the entire tree of undos and redos and like jump back and forth between different nodes and which is very, very cool. But you would, if you're auto saving, you need that.
Right.
Unless you're just like auto saving to a temporary file, which is just a lame way of doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alper says, agreed, and mostly to scale the activity or business. If people had to call to Amazon to buy something, they wouldn't be where they are now. Okay. I think it depends. The same way that you have a staging area in source control and carefully craft your commits, some applications need this kind of behavior for users as well. Yeah, totally agreed.
Well, that's true, but we have I'm talking specifically about code. You have a staging area in source control for your commits. So you already have that. We don't need another one. You already have a good one for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I like, for example, like in Evernote, if I had to hit save every time I'm editing notes in Evernote, I probably would not use the tool, right? I'm just typing my notes, typing my notes. It is saving, and it keeps history. right? So if I'm like, I like the way my note looked an hour ago, I can hit history and it's going to show me the iterations as it was saving. So if I want to go back to one of those, it's easy for me to do so, right? What else? If you automatically save everything, you lose context. Okay. If a user wants to make a change to a contract in a system, there must be a reason for it.
You can tell he's been doing the
To be able to
CQRS training.
nice.
Yeah.
They should be able to explain why they're making a change. It's like, yep, absolutely. I actually
You
there
don't
is
want
a
to make a change to a contract. You want to do a thing, and a change
yeah,
to the contract is a side effect of the fact
yeah,
to do the thing. Capture the thing that you want to do because when someone's going to ask for analytics.
yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I have this. Yeah, look at this blog post. Holy cow, it's from 10 years ago, right? You have been deleted. And it's pretty much me talking about these things, right? So if I see a user story that says something like, oh, as a user, blah, 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 I want to delete, I immediately go back and say, no, you don't want to delete, right? And the example that I normally bring to people is you have like an employee screen, you snap a delete button on it. As a human person, do you ever walk up to somebody else and say, you sir have been deleted? It it makes no sense, right? The person may have been fired, may have been transferred to another branch of the company. There's some sort of business activity related to that, what we developers call as delete, because oh yeah, we need to erase that person from the database. Ugh, right? That's technical implementation. So yeah, I see where that Augusto who's posting that. Yeah. So yep. Yep. Yeah, it's the same thing. Another example is oh yeah, I need to allow the user to edit the address of a customer. Okay. Why would you want to change the customer's address? Is it a permanent change or is it a temporary change? Right? Maybe the customer has changed into a new physical address. Maybe that person is going like on a vacation, a 3-month vacation. So now they need to temporarily have their address as this new one. And after the 3 months, what do you want to do? Do you want to automatically revert back, or do let people know, look, that person had indicated they would be away for 3 months. Do you want to check with them to see if they are back? It's not just a matter of putting a text box on a form and let the user edit that information.
I've also been thinking about this tribes thing.
Uh
It's interesting
huh.
because I mean it's easy. I mean, it's nice in an article. You can just put people, okay, you're this tribe, you're this tribe, you're this that. But the more you think about it, I mean, I am using software as a tool, but I'm interested in Haskell. Why? Well, I mean, I'm interested in Elm, for example, but there's a specific reason for it. It's just like they claim that no runtime errors, like ever. I mean, they deployed thousands and thousands of lines of code written in Elm, and they don't have a single runtime exception. So
Okay.
that is something I'm interested in. Why? Because yeah, I mean, because there are no errors. Like the support, the ease of support, and
Yeah,
another
but
example would be like something like Erlang. I mean, I'm I'm nothing like, oh, I want to learn all these details of messaging stuff. But if somebody goes into Erlang and builds WhatsApp with 50 developers, like serving like almost like a billion people around the world, and then they sell the company, well, now I'm interested in it. Not for the beauty of the Erlang code, but because of its scalability and messaging capabilities and all that stuff. So, yeah, it's kind of so it just makes me think about the tribe. Okay, yeah, I want to use it as a tool, but like there is sometimes when like the really good stuff comes out of the other tribes, and
Sure.
like you at least you haven't need to have an like open mind to just like see it, right? Because
Yeah.
the next big thing is going to probably come out of one of those tribes, and that
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's exactly like kind of what he's talking about in this article. That a lot of like Like he's like all the big picture stuff has come out of group 1. All the optimization stuff has come out of group 2. Almost most of the end user software has come out of group 3. I will say I will caution against being too impressed with the whole no runtime errors thing, because I mean, if you think about the categories of runtime errors that we actually get, it's pretty easy to see how you can solve it. I mean, like, you know, you have a type that doesn't allow null references, so you can type check for it. That probably is what, like 60% of errors right there. Or like, you know, what's another reason that you might get an error? The database is down, right? Or the database rejected your connection. Why do you? Well, if with a type system you can enforce that someone has to provide what you do if the database is down, then yeah, you wouldn't have a runtime exception from that. You would have a user handled error. But what would you be doing in the user handled error? Probably just shutting down the program, right? It's kind of two in one hand. You know, it's nice for some of those checks to exist and helps you avoid certain errors. I feel like it's not as impressive as people make it sound, because
You know,
it's just a guide to make you think about all those things. And in a lot of those cases, what we want is what the default is anyway, right?
no, it makes me think. Alper said, "I don't want to solve the problem. I want to eliminate them." And the whole, no runtime errors. I remember back in my Foxborough days, a lot of people, what they used to do whenever they were gonna like do a demo of their software to clients or whatever, they would add one line of code to the on error star, which would essentially just say, if there's any error, just swallow it. So the apps had no runtime errors whatsoever. So that's an easier way to fix it.
Yeah, I mean, like, solving it, I don't know. It's just, again, like, how are you going to solve the fact that sometimes your database is down?
Right.
Well, you can't solve it. You could just, think about it and code something for that situation, or not code for something for that situation. Let the application do the default. Like, there's no other solution. Like that's the totality of the circle. So
well, that's a problem that you don't have to think about. Then that becomes like an infrastructure problem. It's a cloud's responsibility to just like make the availability multi-region, and then you can just get it to an acceptable SLA. Then it's off your
never
plate.
going to be. It's still going to be down sometimes. Sometimes you're still going to run out of memory for your application. I mean, at some point we're still running on hardware, so that stuff is going to happen. So it's good stuff because it makes you think of it, but I would caution against buying into the hype too much, because it's still fundamentally that you're just using the type system to make sure that people think about it and are explicit, right? And maybe someone does Haskell and wants to tell me that I'm completely wrong, but pretty sure I'm not.
Those are all pretty good conversations. So glad that we have all these things being brought up and it's all recorded so that we can let other people benefit from this, because this is a lot of good stuff. Very cool. I mean, even this morning I'm currently reading this book called A Seat at the Table, a CIO guide in an agile world or something like that. And he talks about like, if somebody like a CIO promises the business like 99.99% availability of a system, that still means about 8.5 hours every year that the system's going to be down, right? And if the business ends up running into that, maybe, the system has been down for 2 hours. What's up with those 99.99% available? Well, yes, 2 hours is still within that 0.1%. And then question being, okay, if that when that happens, how much money are we losing? What do we want to have around that? So if it's a case like, well, the database is down, okay, what can we do about it? Well, is it okay if we show the user data from 2 hours ago. And we let the user know, look, our systems are down, but the data as of 2 hours ago, this is what we had. Is that okay? In many cases, like, yeah, sure, right?
Yeah. Oh, that lots of nonsense. Yeah, that actually reminded me of a recent. I do have to drop in a minute, but
Right.
there's some articles. The guy was like talking about how Erlang and Elixir, like you can get 9 nines of uptime. 99.9999%. It's like, I mean, like, yeah, that's impressive. Erlang and Elixir are very cool. People should study them. But it's not because of the language itself. It's because it's inherently distributed. You give me a C# program, all load balanced, running in the cloud across a ton of different machines on a ton of different platforms. I can get it to 9 nines as well. It's Erlang and Elixir make it easy to do, right? It's not the the impressive thing is that it's distributed, not that there's something special about the language. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well,
All
this
right.
is
Yeah. I got.
that
I'm
time
sorry.
to wrap up. Absolutely. Thanks everybody for joining us and contributing to the conversation. This was really good stuff. The recording should be up within an hour or so. And I hope to see you guys again next week. Guys, have a nice afternoon.